What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. I think it's our third or fourth interview today, and every guest is just amazing. So our next guest for this interview, her name is Erica Brinker. She's the founder and host at The Brink Media. She started her career in the fashion industry, worked at places like Ralph Lauren in New York, and then since moved into tech in areas such as aerospace, and now she's running her own podcast. So with that said, Erica, I'm going to bring you on. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Where in the world are you calling in from?
I'm coming from sunny Arizona, so I'm in the Phoenix area.
Nice, beautiful. So tell me, what is the Brink Media? What are you guys building?
So At The Brink, I mean, of course, it's a play on my last name, but
Mm,
At The Brink is all about inflection points in people's lives. I'm fascinated what changes a person, what transforms them. And so when you're at the brink, what's that inflection point that kind of defines your before and after? I'd say 30 to 40% of our guests so far, and we've had 25 guests in season one that we're still working our way through, but probably
hmm
30 to 40% of them are founder stories. I love founder stories. I'm an investor and advisor myself on several startups. And I just love to hear what makes them tick, what made them come up with an idea, what keeps them motivated. So whether it's personally or professionally, we kind of cover it all. It's meant to feel like a conversation with friends.
I love that. That's actually oddly one of my favorite things to do as well. That's hopefully what we'll be doing today. So, just to kind of go back to the beginning, you spent what 2 decades in C-suite roles, spanning fashion, aerospace, and renewable energy at companies like Ralph Lauren. I think Honeywell as well. You mentioned. So, what's the through line that you can kind of like see across all of these different industries?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things people are surprised about, that you could start in fashion and then end up in something like aerospace
Mm.
or software.
hmm
Honestly, I feel this way probably about a lot of different functions. I have a commercial background, so sales and marketing is what I've done for the last 2 decades. Um, it really, the fundamentals of segmentation, for example, like really understanding your customer, understanding what drives them, what's their buyer behavior, is very similar from the choices you make to what you put on your clothes, like what you wear each day, to what makes a B2B decision. And I think that we used to think about B2C and B2B as like very different animals, but with technology moving as fast as it has, B2B marketers have access to most of the same tools and tricks as our B2C counterparts. And so you kind of see that decision making. So I'll give an example. We want, in our business, when we make buying decisions for our business, we want that same slick interface that maybe you have with your Nest thermostat at home. Like our expectations have changed of B2B experiences. And so we want customers to kind of have those same expectations, right? So to me, it was about learning the industry. At aerospace, hands down, by far was the hardest. At Honeywell, they had something like 800,000 SKUs when I was there. So understanding all those different products was an incredible, it was a feat in itself. But once you understand the product and the customer and the segmentation, it's kind of all the same. And so I always tell people, if there's an industry they're passionate about, they should really learn about the industry, but don't be afraid to dip your toe in. That's actually how I ended up in renewable energy for the last 5 years. It was a very intentional decision because I wanted to be part of a transition that would make the world better for my kids. And so, again, it was a learning curve, but it wasn't insurmountable because the fundamentals of how you go to market and your commercial capabilities don't really change.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So I guess just to kind of keep moving forward, I was reading. So you started, like you mentioned, in New York, right? And working for companies like Ralph Lauren and Tiffany before eventually landing in aerospace. Like, well, what did that first industry teach you that kind of stuck with you the longest?
Oh, I learned so much in those early days. I'm a lifelong learner, so I like learning all the time. But some of the things that you learn in your early roles are about just what good looks like. I had an incredible first boss. Her name was Steffi, and what I really loved learning from her was actually observing her and how she worked. And she had this very cool, calm way about her and the way she dealt with chaos and challenges that were thrown her way. And I saw how people treated her with such great respect because of the way that she was consistent. So I think I learned consistency in the workplace, how to bring out the best in people by listening first and then kind of deciding what to do later. Those are things that I learned early on, but working in the fashion industry and particularly in marketing, I think you inevitably also learn what good looks like in a brand. Ralph Lauren was famous for this. Ralph was very, very engaged in two areas of the business. One was obviously the clothing design themselves, but the other was the brand and marketing piece. And so, if you were in the marketing team, you actually got a front row seat to how he thought, what he was thinking, what was important to him, and how to make a brand that carries a legacy with it, which most brands are not successful in doing. And so having that early fundamental of learning from someone like him was a really incredible experience.
I can only imagine. And then at Honeywell, right? You led marketing and commercial excellence for the aerospace business. Like, wow, what an amazing opportunity that must have been. So, what's different about building a brand and a commercial function inside of like a large industrial company versus, let's say, a fashion house?
Well, the go-to-market is so different. That's what really is different when you talk about learning the fundamentals of a business. It's not just about the products and the customers. It's about like how do they buy very functionally. And so in the aerospace business where I started in aero and then I eventually went into the corporate business, and then went to their spinoff software business. But in aerospace, what was interesting and what you have to deal with oftentimes is you're not selling direct to your customers. So we were selling direct to, say, OEMs like an Airbus or a Boeing, but we were also and mostly selling to people that were selling on our behalf. And so, how do you engender trust and knowledge in the people that have to sell on your behalf through distribution or elsewhere? Because maybe we were a third tier supplier to particular customers. And so, really learning the intricacies of why people buy, what they're looking for, understanding their characteristics. That's why I always go back to segmentation for any founder and for anyone in a business, going back to the basics of segmentation and understanding that all of your customers are not the same and why they buy is very different is critical to the way you set things up. And that's what really defines the difference between a B2C business and a B2B business. In B2C, you're trying to have this one-to-one relationship. In B2B, you're trying to figure out who are this group of buyers, what do they care about, what's motivating them. So are they cost buyers? Like, are they purely based on price? Do they really care about maybe safety? Or is it something like longevity? Do they want a product that's going to last a really long time? And no customer is all of those same things. And so it's important to go back to the basics and understand your segments. And so I'd say in the aerospace industry, and Honeywell, by the way, is a great university, so to speak, for executives because you work with some of the best people in the world. Before they just recently broke up into different companies. But when I was working there were 130,000 employees there. And so it's a giant organization and the customers are many. And so I think one of the things I always told my team is when you try to talk to everybody through marketing, you end up talking to no one because the segments all care about different things. And so really put yourself in their shoes. And the other thing, because I started in marketing and then expanded beyond that into sales at Honeywell, the other thing that I think is not well understood is marketers sit at their desk most of the day behind a screen and they don't come in direct contact with the customer oftentimes. And so one of the things that I felt was really important for the team was for them to go out with their sales counterparts and hear what the customers were saying firsthand. And that made a really big difference in the way that they were approaching, their plans. So when they're putting together their business plan, is this something that I came up with sitting behind a desk looking at a spreadsheet, or did I actually hear a real customer say a real thing that would actually change why they buy? And so we actually had in their performance expectations annually that they had to do X amount of customer visits with their sales counterparts, so that they had that relationship with the customer, but also a greater empathy for the plight of a salesperson.
That's great. I wish more companies I'd worked at had that. So you built brand and demand functions across 4 different industries. So what's the actual skill that transfers no matter the sector?
When I am hiring real brand people, not so much salespeople or even marketing or digital media people, but real brand people, when they're considering brand, I look for people that have the ability to have empathy, people that can put themselves in a customer's seat and say, what is my pain point? I think the other thing that they have to do, oftentimes this is a challenge in strong engineering companies or products that are highly technical, you have to have the ability to take features and functions and turn them into the pain points the customer actually has. What I see a lot is, and you can see this in healthcare, aerospace, software, you have a lot of these like whiz bang, big words, all this stuff that sounds really cool to an engineer that just simply does not translate to a customer and why they would actually need that product. And so you see a lot of misses. And so in brand, you have to be able to translate what's great and unique and differentiated about a product into what are the real day-to-day challenges that your customer comes in contact with that would change their mind and maybe make their life easier.
I love that. Yeah, so simple yet not so easy, I would say.
Not done often. Yeah.
At the Brink is built entirely around inflection points, the moments that kind of change everything, right? So what made you decide that was the lens you wanted to build a media company around?
Well, there's a couple things. One, I think there's not enough female voices in the media. So that was one of when I'm looking for podcasts, I listen to a lot of different things, but I felt like we were missing some female voices. I think also, particularly women in leadership, struggle with the balance of their personal and professional life because we're often burdened with much of the at-home care while we're still carrying on a full-time job. And I know that's something for me personally that I have, I'm constantly juggling. But also just on a personal note, 10 years ago, I lost my son, Luca. He was 4 months and 10 days old. And that was a moment for me that did change everything. We say At The Brink, the podcast is about the moments that change everything. And that's mine. I was working at Honeywell at the time. And, when you go through something like that so many people don't experience, both at work and at home, my own family, people don't know what to say. People don't know what to do. They want to say the right thing and they more desperately don't want to say the wrong thing. So what inevitably ends up happening is nobody says anything. At first you have the funeral and you have people sending you cards, but then after that, kind of nobody talks because they don't want to make you feel bad. And so some of the people that really helped me the most were people I didn't even really know. There were people that a friend of a friend reached out and said, hey, I heard what happened to you, if you want to talk. And I took them up on it. And I found those conversations of people that really understood what I was going through to be more helpful than anything else I could do. But take my own personal loss and translate that to anything somebody might be going through, whether it's a founder story or it's childhood cancer, or it's someone that goes through a traumatic professional event. It could be some sort of medical issue. in the podcast, we talk about those stories and how that person got to the other side. And what I hope in listening to it is that the listeners are either hearing themselves in a way that they could maybe attack those challenges they're facing in their own life. Maybe they have a friend or family member going through it. And so that they create a better sense of understanding. We're in this digital age where we're not always seeing people in real life anymore. And so it's really meant to be a conversation, like I said, among friends. You're just kind of peering into a conversation. And from it, I hope you take away greater understanding, maybe something professional, maybe it's something personal. But that's really the basis of the show.
Got it. And across your guests on At The Brink, is there a pattern in how the people who kind of navigated their own inflection points well actually did it?
I mean, sometimes you see maybe a belief that your current state isn't going to be the state forever. I mean, that was something when I was at my own brink moment. That was one of my big questions is, am I going to feel this way forever? Like, is this where I'm going to sit forever? Is this just like my new baseline? And I think that that's a question that a lot of my guests have, whether it's starting their business or they go through something traumatic, like, is this my new normal? And so that's something that you hear. And that's something I try to pull out of the guests through their story too, because I'm talking to them because they are on the other side and they're figuring out ways. Now, the way they figure it out is all different. Some people, it's finding a professional to help them through it. Sometimes it's going through a book. Sometimes it's like how I talk about grief is like, you have to just go through it. You can't avoid it. You can't run from it. So I think everybody, the way they tackle it is different, but I think this belief or this question, this internal question is this my new normal? Is this the way it's going to be forever? Or am I going to try to get to the other side in a way that is better than where I am today?
That's really inspiring. So I was going to ask you, so you've led marketing, right? Commercial and ESG functions. Like which of those disciplines, Erica, like taught you the most about kind of how a business actually creates lasting value versus, short-term wins?
That's such a tough question, and I guess I'll give you a political answer. With marketing and to a certain extent sales, you kind of like have to travel at this 30,000-foot level of understanding everything about everything. You reach, but it's kind of like everything about everything as it relates to the customer, and so it's the customer. It's internally, what resources do we have? What levers do we have to deliver to the customer? When you're in sales, if they, you try to throw in the kitchen sink so that you can close the deal. With marketing, you really need to understand your customer incredibly well. ESG, and I guess now a lot of people call it sustainability. The challenge there and what makes that unique is that it really takes the entire company from the top down. And what I mean by that is a lot of the goals are around, what's your workforce makeup? What is your packaging like? How is your product produced? And that takes so many different parts of the company. I mean, it's everyone from HR to your sourcing team to you still have your sales and marketing team. You're reaching into the entire, like, just thinking about the sustainability reports that I had to put together when I was a public officer and leading ESG. In the US, it's really lost traction probably in the last couple of years, but in Europe, and I was working for a solar company at the time, in Europe, that is the perseverance and the focus on sustainability has not gone away, not even a little bit. And if you want to be part of European green funds and be looked at and invested in by European investors, you have to continue focusing on it. And so the things that I always recommended to people as they're putting in their own programs is, does your leadership team at the very top have any goal associated with sustainability that they care about and that their compensation depends on? Those are things that you have to think about. If you only have a US based customer, you probably have a different point of view, but that's why it's tough to answer that question, because I think they teach you different things about business. I don't know. And at the end of the day, a company, particularly if you're public, you're thinking about every quarter has to be, your best quarter. And so that drives a different kind of behavior than companies that get to remain private. You have a luxury of making different kinds of decisions. So those are the things that I think about, even working with startups now today. It's like, is your end game to IPO, or do you want to have full control? Because when when you're a public company, you have different drivers, and it will drive different behavior. So I'd say every role, every industry has taught me something different, and I feel fortunate that I've been able to bring those things along with me.
And what's the most like counterintuitive thing you've learned about building at the brink that, most people in media or advisory would disagree with?
Ooh, I don't know if they would disagree with it, but wow, it's a lot of work. I underestimated how much work it would be. I'm kind of one of those people. I've loved being a mentor to people that are coming up. I love sharing my story. I want people to benefit from what I've learned. I'm not a gatekeeper. What was maybe surprising about developing this as I'm sourcing guests is that a lot of people don't want to share. They want to be listeners. And so that's, you have to reach a lot of people to get 25 episodes. And we're going into season 2, and I'm sourcing guests, and I'm finding things like, if you've worked in corporate America, it's hard and you're still there, it's hard to share fully, because the expectation is that you have a work self and a personal self, and the two should never meet. I'm learning lots of different things. So it's an interesting journey, but it's also one I'm super passionate about. And I want to continue highlighting founder stories, because I think, especially in the age of AI, some of the things we're going to be seeing is a lot of new companies popping up, and they need the tools to grow and scale. And that's what I want to get to the heart of as well.
That's really interesting. And then, Erica, at the Brink Media pairs essentially like a growth advisory practice with a video podcast. So how do those two halves of the business actually reinforce each other?
Well, for founders that I talk to, if they want help scaling their business, certainly I am more than willing to jump in and do that. And sometimes that's a conversation, sometimes it's a longer engagement. It really serves as the baseline platform for just kind of learning for founders. In terms of the advisory itself, though, right now it's more myself and my president and the executive producer of the podcast. We can go into companies and help them with their different challenges. But moving forward, I see us doing more coursework, in-person workshops, things like that maybe they're not long-term engagement. Maybe they need help fixing a particular thing, or maybe they just want to, there's a person that they need help focusing on. I was advising just a CEO on, he was inexperienced in certain areas. He came from a technical background and needed help on how to commercialize his business. And those kinds of challenges are super interesting for me to crack. And I love seeing people, the light bulb go off on how they can support their business and scale it in a way that they didn't even imagine, because they were coming professionally from a very different place.
Makes sense. When you sit down with like a company on the advisory side, what's the first place you look to kind of like find the gap between where they are and where they think they are?
Well, I love to go into whatever their CRM is, whatever their analytics are. So whether that's HubSpot or Salesforce or Pipedrive, and see what the data tells us. I like to look at data first before someone gives me a polished PowerPoint of what they want me to know. And then I see where the incongruencies are between those two things. So what do you say you are? And then what do your sales tell you? I obviously like to go to the website. I know they're a dying beast, but it's still important to see. And then it depends on the business. If the business has investors or advisors already, I love to talk to them to see what their observations are. Really smart founders build a great advisory board quickly and early. And so I do like and oftentimes they're building these advisory boards because they're trying to fill in the gaps of what they can't quite hire yet. And so just kind of laying that all out and seeing who's buying, why, who's not buying, and why, and then understanding what are the observations of the other people that are surrounding the business.
Okay, awesome. So, Erica, you were also a contributor to the World Economic Forum agenda and a member of the Forbes Business Council. So, what is a position you hold on business or leadership that you know is not like the popular one?
Oh, someday I'm going to write a book about it, but I I think overall organizations get something wrong with marketing and sales, and what they do is they separate the two functions and they give them two different leaders with two different mandates, and what you inevitably end up seeing is a lot of finger pointing. And it's, well, marketing didn't give me what I needed so that I could close my deal, or sales didn't use the stuff that we gave them to sell, and that's why it's not working. And so I'm a big believer in making those two functions report to the same person. I mean, yeah, you can have layers, you can have spans and layers, but at the end of the day, there needs to be one person that's accountable for both. And it may be different in different industries. You could probably argue that in consumer businesses, you may not want that, or you might have like a head of brand that stands alone or something like that. But at the end of the day, the two, in order for them to have a symbiotic relationship, they have to have they have to be working towards the same goals. And so that's something I feel really strongly about. And once I had both under me, it was kind of like, okay, this makes total sense. I would never do it any other way. And I don't really interview for other roles anymore, but in the past, when I was, if I didn't have both, I just was not interested, because I know what good looks like now. And I know not everybody agrees with that, but I know that's one of my controversial takes. I have a friend that's actually writing a book on CMOs and what it takes to be a good CMO now and how that's changed. And I told him that I think the role of the CMO is dead unless sales is included. And so he's like, oh yeah, I probably won't be putting that in the book. I said, no, I get it. Like that's my take on it.
That is quite counterintuitive, yet makes a lot of sense. So, interesting. Where do you want At The Brink Media to be in a few years? The advisory side, the podcast, or both?
Well, I would love to help as many founders as possible, whether it's, standalone products or me being able to advise or come in. With the podcast, I hope it's something that a lot more people listen to, grow. I want to tell more stories, not just through the podcast, but through other channels. And so that's something we're working towards now. I want it to be a brand associated with trust, with truthful storytelling, with being at the intersection of business and culture. And so those are the things I think about, kind of like, I mean, I guess to equate it maybe to kind of like a Mel Robbins. I think she does a lot of work that I think is very valuable for both business, for people personally and for businesses. And so I kind of think about it in that same vein.
Erica, where do people learn more about you? Where do people learn more about At The Brink Media? And yeah, with that, we'll bring this one to a close.
Awesome. Well, we're on YouTube. It's At The Brink with Erica Brinker. I'm on Instagram. I'm great at responding on LinkedIn, Erica Brinker. So you can find me any of those channels. I try to get back to everybody that reaches out. So feel free to reach out to me in any of those channels.
Cool. And I see we have a bunch of people listening live. Thank you all for tuning in, and yeah, everyone in the future as well. So until next time, everyone, cheers. Erica, hang out for 1 minute. I'm just going to bring this stream to an end. I'll see you on the other side.